Welcome back, everybody. This is our last session for week 7 of the Select Chicago Foreign Direct Investment Conference for 2020. It's our 5th annual conference, and I'm really excited to have Sherwin Pomerantz with us, who works with the state of Illinois and the Middle East office. So I'm going to have Sherwin introduce himself a little bit. I've gotten to know him a number of times from different speeches with our alliance partner, with the with Richard Pullen's group, and so he can talk a little bit about those programs. And then he and I are going to talk about a lot of these great developments that we're having in the Middle East just in the last 6 months. So Sherwin, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late for you in Jerusalem, and so thank you again for coming to speak with us today.
Sure, Michael, it's my pleasure, and appreciate the invitation, and also appreciate the opportunity to talk about, one aspect of what Illinois does that might not be as well known as we would hope it would be to a lot of people that are perhaps participating in this event. So, as Michael indicated, I'm the CEO of a private business development consulting group here in Israel called Atid EDI Limited. We have, as part of our business line, have represented for a number of years the export promotion and foreign direct investment promotion interests of a number of U.S. states. We currently have 5 of them, including Illinois. We also represent the investment interests of Invest Hong Kong. We do a lot of work with the Export Promotion Office in the Ukraine, and we've been doing this for the better part of 29 years. And for the state of Illinois, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, we basically cover the region from Israel pretty far east out to the Gulf, Dubai, Oman, Qatar, UAE, pretty much that whole area, Saudi, Egypt, Jordan, everything in this catchment area that's commonly referred to as the Middle East. For the record, our participants today should know that the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity does have a number of people like us around the world. They have somebody based in Tokyo, they have somebody based in Toronto, a colleague based in Mexico, another one in China, and of course, Sharon Stead, who has been the director in the Brussels office handling Europe for a number of years as well. In addition, of course, to the staff in Chicago that supports all of the activity around the world. So the state really is well positioned to augment many of the objectives that Select Chicago talks about so frequently. So overseas companies that are looking to come into America and are considering Illinois can not only deal, as far as Chicago is concerned, with Select Chicago, but can also tap into the combined resources that are available from the state of Illinois, including technical assistance and access to incentive programs, employee training opportunities where there are programs to reimburse overseas companies for the expense of training new people once they come into the state, and generally supporting the whole ecosystem, if you will, of foreign direct investment attraction. Maybe I would actually just illustrate that with something that we're currently working on, the kind of thing that we see all the time. Many of you think of Israel, and you think of Israel as a high-tech center. We're commonly referred to as startup nation, which is true. But to the side of that is a whole manufacturing sector that's unique to this part of the world. So 60 years ago or so, the kibbutz organization, the group that represents the cooperatives around the country, decided or looked at the issue of, what does a country do that has basically no resources, no natural resources to speak of, has a lot of brain power and some brawn. And so a huge plastics industry developed because that was something that you didn't need much in terms of raw materials to produce and to build. And so we're working with a company right now, as an example, a long-standing, good reputation organization that works in the area of polyurethane products that's actually looking to open up something in the United States. Not really sure where they want to go. They know the kind of company they would like to work with, ideally, and it usually starts this way. The company will come to us and we'll talk to them, and they say, well, we're not sure we want to really open a plant, but maybe we can find a joint venture partner. So that's one of the things we do. We will try to identify, and we have in this case identified 5 companies in the state that are in similar fields. We flew it by the people here in Israel, let them look at those websites. They agreed that these were companies that are potential partners for them. And we've now built access to those 5 companies and are working with them to orient them to what the Israeli firm is looking for. What usually happens in these cases is that's the initial objective because it looks like it can save money in helping the Israeli company get situated in the United States. What normally happens after a year sometimes of this kind of work is they make the decision that they really do have to open up on their own. So we assume that will be the next step after they go through the process of trying to look for a joint venture, which we will help them with. And then after that, they'll say, you know what, let's just consider opening up a production facility. We're going to employ 50 people to start. It could grow to 300 and see what you can do for us on the Illinois side to convince us to locate there as opposed to the competitive surrounding states. So this is the kind of work that all of us do abroad, in addition, of course, to assisting local companies to find export markets in the region. Many of you who are following the news understand that there have been a lot of changes in this region over the last 3 months. The rapprochement between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain has brought what was for many years an under-the-radar relationship where business was being done, but it wasn't being done on the surface. To give you one example of how that works, for many years, we here in Israel have been able to call pretty much anybody in the Arab world, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Qatar, didn't matter. The problem was they couldn't call us back. And in the real old days, that was a real problem because they just couldn't do it. You know, as time went on and technology improved, all of us have U.S. phone numbers as well that ring in our office here in Jerusalem. So we skirted that. And, you change your email address so it ends with a .com instead of a .co.il. And companies have been doing business with regularly. But all of a sudden, now it's all out in the open. And so somebody wrote in the paper a couple of weeks ago, it was amazing. I could call the UAE today. And I said to my wife, I said, it's really funny. We've always been able to call the UAE. The problem is they haven't been able to call us back. But now this is all bubbling up, if you will. And here too, the thrust was, we know that they're interested in us because of the access to technology and there's potential of joint investment and all the rest. But then when you get down and talk to the people at the 10,000 foot level, not the 30,000 foot level, you find that one of the things they're interested in is food, that they're concerned about food security and securing their food supply because they basically don't grow anything there and everything has to be imported. And so they would prefer to import from stable nations as opposed to those that are maybe next door but less stable politically and run the risk of running out of things. We were kind of shocked at that because in the past, what we've done with the UAE, and Illinois is a great example, for the last 12, 13 years, we have brought 10 Illinois companies to the Arab Health Show in Dubai every January. The state takes a booth. We set up 100, 110 advance appointments for these companies even before they get there. We're there with them. We walk the floor. We pull new people into the booth. We make sure the people who we made appointments with actually show up and keep that whole process moving. And there are quite a few Illinois companies that have done well in marketing into the Arab world, supported and encouraged by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And in the last 7, 8 years as well, there's been federal funding to support this kind of activity and subsidize a lot of the costs that go along with that. So, as we say in Hebrew, begadol, generally, as a picture, you see there are a lot of fingers that are in this mix and a lot of sections to the circle. And each one feeds on the other and grows on the other. And our experience has been that where people are open to it, there are all kinds of opportunities. One last point in terms of statistics, people generally don't know, but there is significant foreign direct investment coming out of this region into the United States, primarily out of Israel. I would say 95% out of Israel. Israel, for the last 6, 7 years, has always been among the top 20 sources, largest sources of foreign direct investment into the United States. So that's number one. Number two, it's also important for the audience to know that there's a general canard that goes around that, Israel gets $3.8 billion of foreign aid from the United States every year. Well, that's all. That is true as far as it goes. But the interesting thing is that it's money that's used to support purchases that the Israeli government must make for primarily defense purposes, and all that money has to be spent in the United States. So, in its all strange way, the government is helping to fund it, but the government is also creating jobs in America as a result of it. So, there are all kinds of activities that don't always make it into the papers with the clarity that we would like to see. But you can be sure that when we talk about Illinois and the Middle East, which was the topic that we had selected for this presentation, that we really are functioning in the entire region. And actually, our biggest success in the years we've been with the state has actually been in Saudi Arabia, where when the government there decided they were going to build a brand new technical college in a new location in the country, they needed high-tech furniture for a university setting. And they didn't want to purchase local items, which generally in this area often come from Egypt, because they looked too Middle Eastern. They wanted something that looked high-tech. And so they went to America, they went to us initially, and we allied them with a manufacturer of that kind of furnishings in Illinois. And that company ended up doing about $16 million worth of business, providing the furnishings for that tech college. So we are in the region. We base in Jerusalem, frankly, because we operate in the region. On a practical basis, if we were in Tel Aviv, especially in the old days, and we spoke to somebody and if they asked us where we were, and we would say Tel Aviv, there might be a pregnant pause on the line. If we're in Jerusalem, or sometimes they will say to us, what part of Jerusalem are you in? Because there are political divisions here. And usually the answer is the right part. And that sort of stops the conversation and you go on to the business aspect. So this is basically what we do on behalf of the state. We've been, as I say, in business now for 29 years. The state has been a client of ours for almost 20 years. And we're very, very proud to carry the banner of Illinois in this region and to represent the interests of the companies there, both from an export side and also to encourage foreign direct promotion. So, Michael, I took a quarter of an hour to do that. Maybe I'll stop at that point, and I'm sure there are questions both from you and the people in the group as well.
Yeah, so making sure my mic is on, and I'm going to get a thumbs up from my staff to say, yeah, my mic is on. And Sherwin, this is great. I mean, it's always a treat talking with you, and every time I talk with you, I learn something more. And, we're kind of hitting just really Israel, but I think the last time I was talking with you, you were saying in addition to the UAE and all your new trips to Dubai, or talking about Dubai, you're also in Jordan, you're in Egypt. Can you run through the additional countries that you're working in?
Yeah, we just got a good example. In addition to our company, we have actually a worldwide network now of companies like ours around the world in key locations. There are four of them in Europe. We have somebody in South Africa, Singapore, Korea, Japan, China, of course, Australia, India, Mexico, Sao Paulo, and Brazil. So just earlier this evening, I got a call from our colleague in The Hague, and he said, Sherwin, you guys operate in Jordan as well, do you not? And I said, yeah, we do. So he's chasing after a bid or a bid offering from the Netherlands Economic Development Agency that's looking to put together a project where they not only help companies based in the Netherlands find business partners in Jordan, but they also want to identify an equivalent number of companies in Jordan who may have the interest and possibility to hook up with companies out of the Netherlands. So we do operate extensively in Jordan. For those of you that have not been in the region and you're used to driving in Illinois, where you can start at the Wisconsin border and drive for 6 hours south and still be in Illinois. In this country, from the Mediterranean to the Jordanian border is just over 68 miles. And as from where I sit here in Jerusalem, as the crow flies, Amman, the capital of Jordan, is 47 miles from this desk. So we go there frequently. We generally drive. It takes longer than it should for a drive of 47 miles because you have international border crossings and security issues to deal with and what have you. But we do it, and we do it with some frequency. You can even fly. It's a 18-minute flight, but it's extremely expensive and a pain in the neck. So we cover Egypt, we cover Jordan, we cover Oman, Qatar, UAE, the entire GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council area. We also have in the past reached a little bit further west than that. We've done some work in Morocco. We've done some work, a little bit of work in Algeria as well. And in terms of going east, we've gone as far east as Pakistan and even occasionally to India, because the state right now doesn't have people in those places. So we have a pretty wide reach based out of here. And I must tell you, the travel is going to become much easier now that we have the relations that we do. Because, up until now, if you wanted to go to Dubai, for example, you had to fly somewhere else and then pick up a connection and go. And we now have an agreement. There are going to be 112 flights a week between Israel and Bahrain and the UAE and what have you. And they're expecting a huge influx of tourism from here, which they will get, because up until now, unless you had a second passport, you couldn't travel there. It wasn't possible to travel to those countries with an Israeli passport. So most of us in the office have at least two. There are people that even have three. So yeah, so we cover that whole area. We don't cover and Saudi, by the way. We don't go to places where if one of our staff people ran into a problem, we couldn't get them back. Okay, so we don't go to Syria. We don't go to
reason not to go back, but unless you're trying to get them back. But other than that,
we don't go to Syria and Lebanon. But other than that, we pretty much cover the region. Okay.
And you do go to Saudi as well. I just wanted to clarify that Saudi Arabia is one of your countries or not one of your countries?
It is one of our countries. It is.
And that's great. I know one of the things that, with everything in SelectChicago we've been playing with, I will say we've gotten a number of calls about food security in the Middle East, especially in, say, Saudi. And it is just, I think we were talking about that earlier too, about how important food security is. And we never, especially in the Midwest and in Illinois, where so much has grown, we don't think twice about food security and what that's like in a dry desert environment with not as much fresh water as you would think. So do you see that as a continuing, ag tech being one of the larger clusters or focuses coming out of the Middle East in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think what you've seen, look, we had every country in this region. Let me back up. In the next 20 years, the biggest threats, the two biggest threats I think that humanity faces is A, the lack of water, and B, the lack of food. The latest statistics show that as of June of this year, there were 70.3 million displaced persons in the world. That's a huge number. It's the biggest number since World War II. And there are large areas of the world, because of climate change and global warming, that are going to become uninhabitable over the next 20, 30 years. It's just going to be too hot to live there. And so those two things are going to become very, very significant. What Israel did many years ago is we became water self-sufficient by recycling. Our recycling rate is 21 times greater than the next one in the world, which is Spain. Okay, we recycle pretty much every drop of water that you legally can be allowed to recycle. And we also have a large array of desalination plants. So at this point in time, we're water secure, if you will. But most of the countries around us are not. And so they will want that kind of technology, which we already export. Everybody knows about, our ability to be able to turn the desert green, so to speak. The Jordanians took advantage of that as soon as the peace agreements were signed in 1994, and they've been a customer of Israeli irrigation technology. I'm sure that the Gulf will do the same very quickly. And in terms of the food side, as I said, when we spoke with the people in Dubai, we were shocked at what they wanted. Organic foods of any variety. One of the companies said to me, "Juice." He said, "You guys make the best juice." What you said, Michael, is true. If you're growing up in America, and I think you know that I spent 20 years in the Chicago area. I lived in Des Plaines from 1964 to 1984. And, nobody in America ever thought of those kinds of issues. The biggest problems we ever had were not being able to get gas, right? That was where you saw, quote, shortages. But you never saw shortages of food per se, unless something happens somewhere in the world. But now you're going to see it because things are happening that never happened before. I mean, you had some storms in Iowa this spring that basically ruined a tremendous harvest of grain, and it just not salvageable. And then that's going to affect something somewhere along the line. It's going to make something more expensive, going to make somebody more nervous. So yes, the issue of food security and water availability are going to be huge issues. They are now already. They're just going to grow. Probably, if the world leadership made any mistake at all in 1946, when World War II was over, it was not realizing that the first thing the world had to do in order to recover from World War II was to make sure that people everywhere in the world had something to eat, and that food supply was secure. And leadership didn't do that. It didn't do it
Yeah,
globally.
and I still don't think I mean, granted, World War II and supplies and food was still a major issue, and afterwards they just still were not thinking about it. You had, still
For sure.
one half the population we have now back
Right.
at the end of World War II, so they were not really thinking about running out of food. But
Yeah,
also
and the
some,
people.
what's been great about learning about the things with the Middle East, we have these new agreements with the Gulf states and the UAE, and rumor has it there's going to be many more coming. So that's completely changing the dynamic of the cosmopolitan nature of the Middle East. If you're able to fly directly to Dubai instead of going through another country and another passport, that is a complete game changer for the region. And I think some of that is how do you, let's kind of put our prognosticator cap on and look at with the newfound mobility of both material, talent, and treasure. What do you think the Middle East is going to look like in like 3 to 5 years with that?
Yeah, well, you already have seen some of it. I mean, if you think about it, for those people who have been, let's say, Dubai is a good example. Uh, 45 years ago in Dubai, it was desert. It was desert. There was nothing there. And yet you go there today, and it's nothing short of amazing. Now, there were a lot of issues that came up for them to be able to get there. But now, because the mobility it's been so much easier, and there's always been a lot of movement. I mean, let's go back a minute. People have always been moving around from one place to the other. What you're seeing now is that the things that made those movements more difficult, those obstacles, if you will, are being taken away. So it's not just that we can now fly nonstop from Tel Aviv to Dubai. It's that we can fly anywhere in that direction and not have to go this way around Saudi Arabia or this way around Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, the air rights thing was really a
Huge,
mind blower
huge,
for me, and kind of
huge.
going,
Yeah,
oh yeah, because of these agreements, you can now fly as the crow across Saudi Arabia for different things instead of having to do, circumnavigate it, which is
right.
just again such a game changer.
Now it doesn't only apply to the fact that you're going to save 2 hours of flight time to get from point A to point B. It also reduces fuel consumption. It reduces the carbon footprint. It reduces hopefully it'll reduce the cost of flying as well if the airlines don't put it in their own pockets. But those are all options today. A huge option that nobody ever thought would happen. When we talk to the people in the UAE about food, and we talk about supplying food from here, right now it has to go either by ship or by plane. But there's already activity going on in Jordan, where we've had relations for almost 30 years, building logistics centers in Jordan so that Israeli products can come across the border and go to the logistics center by truck. And then from there, they can be put on trailers and taken anywhere in the region.
Oh wow, yeah, and so say U.S. logistics, is that now a new market for companies from the United States going to the Middle East and figuring out how to do logistics? I don't know. It's just an open question.
Yes. So what happens, we believe, and we've talked about this in a few other webinars we've done over the last couple of weeks, when we look at, what are the new opportunities? What have the changes done to create other opportunities for exporters in America, for example? So the capability or the desire to do that, to build those kind of centers is there. The local knowledge of how best to do it is not necessarily there. So you have people who know how to build buildings, but you don't have people necessarily who have got experience in worldwide logistic management. Right. So you will
Yeah,
find
somebody
as
was.
the if you go to the UAE and you go to meet the senior officers, let's say, of Emirates Airlines, I took a former director of DCEO there on my first trip a number of years ago. There was only one Emirati in the room. Everybody else around the table was either from England, the United States, or Ireland, or Australia, because they don't have the local talent with the experience. They have the money to buy that talent, but they don't have the resident talent. So it opens up tremendous opportunities for American companies who are willing to do it and do it seriously. And they're in
Yeah, I
competition.
mean, yeah, one of my friends was telling me about an IKEA in that region where it would be delivered to the factory or to the port within 3 days, but because the logistics was so out of whack, it would take 3 months to get from the port to the house. And so those come into these opportunities that are out there. And so let's kind of go back on the Wayback Machine, Sherwin. How did you get involved in this? What made you decide to want to work with states and foster relationships and matchmake between businesses, countries, and people?
Yeah, so it's a good question. By trade, so to speak, I'm a graduate of the University of Illinois, where I got my graduate degree from in mechanical engineering. The time that I spent in Chicago was basically in the data processing service business at a time when none of us had these things that are sitting on your desk and my desk right now. And when I came here, I'm here 36 years. I got a job. I was hired as an engineer, even though except for a couple of years, I never practiced. But here, everything was very much fixated on degrees. Whatever had degree you had, that's what you were. So I took a job with a solar company as an industrial engineer, which I have a degree in, and very quickly moved over to management. And I was with them for 8 years. We built 450 megawatts of solar generating power in the high desert of California. We were pioneers at the time, and they were a bit before their time, so they closed up. And four of us got together and opened up this business, not really being sure what we were going to do. we had a client. We had the Israel's Ministry of Industry and Trade was a client of ours, and we did all of their English language promotional material. And then an opportunity came along out of California, oddly enough, that the state of California was looking at the possibility of opening up a trade office in Israel. And there was a committee there that was doing it. Look, it's everything, right place, right time. So the committee was being chaired by the former chair of the executive committee of the board of directors of the company here that I used to work for. And he called and he said to me, "You guys interested in doing this?" I said, we've never done it, but we're smart. So we bid it, and actually we didn't get it, but a day later we did get it. There's a whole story about that. It's a political Israel story. And that got us started. And we liked doing it. And then I said to my partners, there's a business here. And I spent in those days, talk about 1990 to 95, I spent maybe 5 trips a year to America talking to every Secretary of Commerce I could meet of individual states. And I said to them, you can run a regional trade and export promotion office out of Israel covering the region. And I said, you can do it with a contractor, because in those days, the people who were overseas were employees. And I said to them, you're never going to be able to sustain that, because with employees, you've got leases, you've got rents, you've got social responsibilities for the staff and all kinds of things. You want to pull out, it's a fortune of money. So eventually, we built this up. At one point, there were 20 U.S. state offices in Israel. And then, it goes up and down with budgets. Today, there are 13. There are 13 state offices. There are also 8 or 9 regional offices. So the Dayton, Ohio area has a representative here. Bio St. Louis has a representative here. The Arizona Technology Alliance has a representative here. Cedar Park, Texas. We represent Cedar Park, Texas. 100,000 people next door to Austin. So there's all kinds of small stuff that goes on as well. Altogether, there are probably 22 or 23 people involved in this organization called the American State Officers Association, which is what I chair here. So that's how we got into it. We built it up. We started looking at other places. We handled Ontario for a while. We did work with Saskatchewan. It's a moving target, so to speak. But our legacy clients, people that we've been with for years, and who see the value of continuity, that's basically it today. That's Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Illinois.
Okay. Yeah, and what we're finding with SelectChicago, now that we're in year 5, we're hitting, sometimes the second rotation of trade officers in the international trade offices. Like Ecuador, we've had 2 different trade commissioners, and NRW Germany, we've had 2 or 3 of them, and so it's just having, I will say there is something for stability and continuity over an extended period of time, because you can't learn the local language, you can't learn the local politic in a 2-year period of time. You need something that's protracted along a long period of time for it to actually make sense.
Yeah, we're starting to see that, by the way, on the U.S. side, that a lot of these clients that we've had for 20 years or so, we've been dealing with the same people, which has made it really very, very effective on both sides. But everybody's getting older, and people want to do something else with their lives, and so they move on.
Right. Well,
someday we will as well.
yeah, I think one of the joys and satisfactions about the SelectChicago program is every day there's something new. It's either getting to talk and learn more about, the Israel UAE thing really blew me away, because I did not think that was coming down the pipe, maybe even in my lifetime. So I was really excited to see that. But that just creates new opportunities and new things to learn and new things to pursue. And so in addition to the UAE, to the new changes, what else are you seeing in the Middle East, or what are you seeing now with kind of this crisscross world. I mean, you and I, before we jumped online today, we're talking about China relations. We were talking about other different people seeing what's post-COVID going to look like. So what are some of your insights on where you think we're going to be at this time next year and 2 years or 3 years from now?
Look, most of us believe that, first of all, COVID is going to be with us for a while. All right. It's not going to go away tomorrow. Hopefully we will, if we don't get at least a guaranteed vaccine, we will get to the point where there's treatment, because humanity probably cannot deal with COVID plus. It's not, 100 years ago, when you had the flu epidemic in America, it was just the flu epidemic in America. And there was undoubtedly some economic relationship to it, et cetera. But people weren't used to traveling all over the world, so they weren't bereft of that possibility. Families were not spread all over the country, so it wasn't that they couldn't see their family. They were next door or down the street or up on the top floor. And so now you have a situation in the world which is much more pressurized, because you have COVID and you have the economic downturn and you have the lack of community that sustains humanity, and you have the inability to see people on a regular basis. My wife and I have 2 children and 6 grandchildren in America, 2 on the East Coast, 4 on the West Coast. I haven't seen them in a year. She hasn't seen them in 2 years. All right. It's crazy. And we can't. So it's not that, we don't want to. You physically cannot do it, because if we ended up coming back here, we'd be in quarantine for 2 weeks, once we landed. So I think the stresses are much greater, but with COVID and with everything else, there are also opportunities. And I think the challenge for people is going to be to identify those opportunities. I'm sure some people, you maybe others, remember the Dustin Hoffman movie, The Graduate. All right? Famous movie. So in the very first scene of that movie, Hoffman comes back from college, and they're out by the pool in California, and his uncle takes him around the shoulder. He says, "What are you going to do with your life?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "Plastics." Now you're talking the early 70s, right? Plastics. So if somebody had that experience in January of this year, the uncle should have said plexiglass. If you were in the plexiglass business in January, you'd be a millionaire today, right? So the COVID has opened opportunities. And what we're seeing is the healthcare industry is going as good as it went. It's going to increase now exponentially. In telemedicine and telemedicine related, nobody wants to see a doctor as often as they used to. The doctors don't want to see you as often as they used to see you. So the telemedicine sector and remote medicine is going to grow. Medical devices that are going to be needed in order to permit people to be at home and do things. I mean, I sit here with a blood pressure cuff on my desk. I can't remember the last time I used it. But 20 years ago, I wouldn't have had that in the house. I had to go to the doctor to get blood pressure tested. Okay, so there are specific areas, and our group is very high on that. Digitalization. What COVID has done is forced everybody to order online, to order in online. Everything now where it can be is being done online, and the systems were not ready. These systems that we're using right here, Zoom and other platforms, when we're overwhelmed initially because they just weren't set up to carry that kind of volume, right? There are other industries that are not going to recover very fast. The hospitality industry is going to have a problem, okay? The airline industry, Lord only knows what's going to happen with the whole transportation sector, all right? But you're going to see China just passed a regulation because of all the problems that we're dealing with and more, that by 2025, 25% of the cars in China have to be electric. All right. Now, you and I both know that the penetration of electric vehicles in America, in comparison to the rest of the world, the numbers aren't even in the same ballpark. I mean, penetration in Europe is 12.6%. penetration in China is already close to 15%. In America, it's 1.2%. All right. So that's going to be a huge opportunity. And yes, if you have 6 kids, you're never going to have an electric vehicle big enough to handle a family of 8. But everybody's going to have a second car. They're going to have to get around the city. We've talked about it for years. So there are all kinds of those opportunities that smart manufacturers and people who, every company today, if they don't already have someone like that, should have a person sitting in a desk saying, what are we going to need 3 years from now to keep us competitive? And then find out where they can get it. I can tell you off the cuff, they can get it here, but there are other places they can get it as well. Okay, and I think that's what's going to happen in commerce. And we've been talking about this on webinars now for 4 months. Everybody, China, Singapore, Australia, Brazil, everybody is saying the same thing because we're seeing the effects day by day, and it's already in place, and people can grab onto those opportunities, or they're going to find themselves out of business.
Right. And I guess that's the main piece. We're going through, next week winds up being the election. And so good, bad, and different changes happening regardless. And I think right now, I think there's going to be a hangover effect of people still not really putting their shoulder to the wheel and looking for that next opportunity. And so I think some of that's happening, but then there's just still a lot of people not doing anything. And I'm just really hopeful that in another month, people are going to be waking up and saying, all right, how do we look for these opportunities that are opening up? And some of it is, it's what's really exciting is a number of the different businesses and people I'm talking to in the Midwest are now looking outward and saying, how do I set up shop? Like this morning, we were in Estonia. Or how do we set up shop in Mexico? How do we set up shop in the Middle East? And saying there's new opportunity, there's new green or called blue ocean opportunities. Right. And it's just great to know that there are, programs like yours out there that, yes, we have we're exporting from Illinois into markets, and you're helping businesses that can come from the Middle East to the Chicagoland area. But there's still that's kind of just scratching the surface of all the different opportunities that are out there. And so I think one of the questions, I know we're going to be able to put up your contact information at the end of the video in getting to know how to contact you. But also, can you run through some of the other resources your company is able to provide? Because we've talked about matchmaking, we've talked about going on trade missions. So what are some other things that you're able to do?
Well, those of us who are in this business also are pretty good at scouting. In other words, going back to my last point, if there are companies that are looking for technology or technological improvements in their products, and it can even be companies that are mainline companies. For years, Coca-Cola has had a scout here, whom they pay very well, I might add. Now, you would think, what's Coca-Cola looking for? But, looking for all kinds of things, new packaging concepts, new, there's food tech. How do you improve the taste after all these years? They're abandoning Tab, Lordy. That's like I don't know, motherhood and apple pie, right? How do you have a world without Tab? But the point is that
absolutely,
yeah, all of us around the world can provide, in the kind of business we're in, provide that kind of service as well. It's much more than matchmaking. All right, it's talking to the guy or woman who worries about what the company's going to need down the lines. All right, see if you can find that somewhere, whether it's Israel or Singapore or Australia or wherever. So that's a third thing besides the export and the foreign direct investment. We can also help companies actually develop their marketing approach to certain countries, because at the end of the day, it's one thing to identify that we're going to, let's say in this part of the world, we're going to have problems in water, and we're going to have problems in food and growth. But how do you change your marketing plan so that you can go in that direction. You know, I have a story that goes back a few years when I first started this business. I don't know if you remember, when I was a kid, Sterling Plastics made a ruler that had holes in the plastic ruler, and you could put it in your 3-ring binder so you wouldn't lose the ruler when you took it back and forth to the house. So the guy who ran and owned Sterling Plastics came to me one time and said he wants to open up an international marketing operation. And I actually went to visit him. They were outside of Boston. And the marketing director in the company looked at him, the president, and said, I want you to know something. If you think that you're going to overlay the international marketing effort on an existing domestic effort and be successful, he says, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's a separate function with separate capabilities and separate technologies. So we can help people make that jump as well and think about it as what they have to do to not only have a good product, but how to get it into a market where it doesn't exist and people aren't familiar with it, but need it. Okay.
Oh yeah, I mean, we had a similar thing a couple of years ago when we were talking about our concierge service, working with companies coming here and making solid introductions, some matchmaking, but more at the municipal level, and helping them understand what a good total fit was going to be. And sometimes it's not whoever's giving them the best entitlement. Sometimes there's a cultural aspect for the community and the company. And we're going to call it a white glove service. You know, and so in the United States, we're used to a white glove being truly catered. And then one of my Chinese friends came up to me and said, do not call it a white glove service. Because in our culture, that means it's basically a state-owned service or a bribed service. So you have to be very, very careful with your language when you're traversing borders.
Interesting enough, Michael, in the beginning of next year, we're going to start a series of 7 or 8 webinars on doing business in. You know, and what do you really have to know that, you know, if you're in Jordan and this happened, I'm not a coffee drinker. I haven't had a cup of coffee in my life. Okay. But I was at the
Really?
border station once going into Jordan. We got there early and the station director said, well, why don't you sit down and we'll have a cup of coffee. Hospitality, you have to drink the coffee. So they came over with a tray and a very fancy pourer and these little cups. And the guy puts the coffee in a cup and I had no choice. I drank it. Terrible stuff, black. So I got finished and he came by again with the tray and I went to put the cup on the tray. But in Jordan, if you do that, or in the Arab world, it means you want more coffee,
Oh, no.
right? You have to take the cup and turn it over.
Oh,
Otherwise,
yeah.
you're asking for more. So, you know, these small things. I might, by the way, add one more service since you asked about it. Uh, Many of us in this business abroad are also capable of managing an agent or sales force for foreign companies. So sometimes a company wants to come in, they need a salesperson, let's say, on the ground. They don't necessarily need, you know, they're not the kind of product that you can put on the shelf and sell, but it's more customized. But they need somebody on the ground to represent them and act as an agent. They have no idea and really can't very easily manage that company or that person 6,000 miles away. So most of us have the capability to act as that managing agent on behalf of a foreign company. We actually have an Israeli company in Japan with a colleague of ours in Japan who's doing that exact thing for them, doing it for years. All right. So he's got a sales team there, which he doesn't manage, but it's being managed by a trust partner, so to speak, that he's comfortable with, that he knows will, you know, provide the kind of supervision that the people need to have in order to be successful. And in this case, they've been doing it already for 9 years, so it is quite successful. Some people call it encore service. There are all kinds of names for it. Encore might be better than white glove.
That's good. I mean, and we've flirted with that. I think some of it comes into capacity, as in it's always finding that right fit between the person that can lead and recruit that sales office and understand that technology, and then really making sure it's a good value for the international company looking to set up shop here. And so that's something that, you know, as we're growing in capabilities and capacity, that is something that we've been looking for adding as an adjunct service. And so I think this is where having good partnerships with folks around the world just really adds to the value of the Select Chicago program, but also all of our partners and our alliance partners as well. And so Sherwin, this has been great. I always love talking with you. I mean, when I got to see you 2 years ago with Richard's thing and you were coming in with ITAGC, I'm definitely looking forward to borders opening up, and then when you're doing your swing through the Midwest, I'm definitely. I know we won't have coffee, so so we're not going to have Turkish coffee, or we're not going to have Jordanian coffee, and so we'll figure out something to eat for that. And so.
Cold coffee. It's not that I don't like the taste. I don't like the hot.
Okay. Well, Sherwin, I wanted to again thank you so much for giving so much of your day for us here. You've given us a lot of great information. And I want to, hopefully I can bring you back, or you'll be open to coming back as we grow in 2021.
Sure, happy to do it. And again, just to remind your viewers one more time that you're lucky in Illinois to have the kind of asset that you have in the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and the people in Chicago and around the state who really support this whole concept and support it with all of their heart and soul, and make sure that it works for the good and welfare of the people of Illinois. So we're proud to be a part of that network.
Great. Well, I hope soon I can get to Israel. That is on my bucket list. And so I would definitely will look forward to doing that when conditions improve. And so, again, all right. Well, thank you so much, Sherwin. And so I'm going to say goodbye for the end of Select Chicago sessions on our 7th day of sessions, and I look forward to spending more time with you soon.